W5, edition 558.
These days, things aren't the way they used to be in Jamaica. It's now become virtually a one-party state since the opposition refused to run in the last election.
I do not recognize the members of this parliament. I do not recognize this government. I do not recognize the Prime Minister.
I don't think we can say that it threatens the democratic process, but there will be a feeling of apprehension.
Myself as an example, because I know when I listened to certain songs, I would have this strong urge for alcohol or strong urge to smoke.
The road to Olympic glory is a tough one for up-and-coming skaters. It takes a lot more than turning triples to have a chance at gold.
Most international events are somewhat prejudged in the sense that a judge has done their homework. They know the ranking from the individual countries. They know who's first, second, and third. They have attended practices. They have watched and seen what every skater does, how they do during the practice. It's not really just a matter of how you skate that day.
We also have the story of a battlefield surgeon who's practicing on the front lines in Belfast. I'm Bill Cunningham with Helen Hutchinson, Jim Reed, and Dennis McIntosh. The program is W5. Good evening. Democracy's on a very thin line in Jamaica these days. The free enterprise government of Prime Minister Siaga has Parliament all to itself. The opposition boycotted the recent election. But despite his power, Siaga may be running out of time. Unless he can get his economic act together, and quickly, the island in the sun could be in for a lot more trouble. And as Jamaica's poet laureate, the late Bob Marley, prophetically observed, the drive for progress and change is very much in the Jamaican air.
There's a natural mystic flowing through the air. If you listen carefully now, you will hear.
Like the country's music, Jamaica's politics have always moved to a rather exotic beat. But even Jamaicans were surprised when a snap election was called last December. Prime Minister Siaga could have waited for another 2 years, but he was riding a wave of popular support for his part in the Grenada invasion, and he was aware of growing economic troubles. The opposition was taken by surprise, and its leader, former Prime Minister Michael Manley, decided to boycott the balloting on the grounds that the voters' lists were out of date.
I do not recognize the members of this parliament. I do not recognize this government. I do not recognize the Prime Minister. They are all bogus.
Unopposed, Siaga's total victory was a foregone conclusion, but it's left many Jamaicans worried about having to dance to the rhythm of what is now virtually a one-party state. The political crisis comes on top of an economic crisis, where the value of the Jamaican dollar has been cut in half, and unemployment and prices are soaring. Gas prices have been raised by 50% to $9 a gallon, and hydro's been hiked by 40%. But even in the face of such troubles, Prime Minister Siaga remains unintimidated by the economy and undaunted by any perceived threat to the democratic process.
I don't think we can say that it threatens the democratic process, but there will be a feeling of apprehension among the people for a period of time until there is an adjustment to it. Bear in mind that in the previous parliament, we held 51 out of the 60 seats. So we virtually held a full house.
Now, Siaga has his full house, but about 40% of the people have no elected voice in Parliament. Aware of the potential for anarchy, Seaga has appointed 9 independent senators and members of the public will be allowed to address Parliament on specific issues.
This is something so new that it's really exciting. I don't know what hidden opinions, views, perspectives exist among the population at large, which may be able to contribute to us doing a better job. And the fact that we can open our doors to that population is an exciting prospect that we may be mining something that has great value that we don't know.
But despite the opportunities for criticism, in this House, only one party, Seaga's Jamaica Labour Party, is allowed to vote. And that's a situation which worries Morris Cargill, a newspaper columnist whose family has lived in Jamaica for over 300 years.
There is a very strong tradition in Jamaica of parliamentary democracy, and I think, like any other Jamaican, I am very distressed that there is no opposition in the House.
You feel this is... How dangerous do you think this is?
I don't think it is dangerous at the moment at all. I think it's just unfortunate. But it is not the fault of the government, it is the fault of the opposition.
Your critics are implying that in this case you're the irresponsible one, or your party.
On the contrary, sir, we did not hold any election on the basis of the massive potential of fraud. We did not hold any election in the breach of solemn agreement. We did not hold any election on the basis of disenfranchising 20% of the people. They who did that are the irresponsible. But they're worse than irresponsible. In fact, I regard it as an example of a clear moral dereliction. I think it was a highly immoral act.
Jamaicans like both their food and their politics hot. This relish for the political fray has led to violence from time to time, but on the whole, the process works. It operates something like a large and quarrelsome family, with the leaders of the political parties viewed as father figures. They refer to the Prime Minister as Eddie, and the leader of the opposition as Michael. What bothered Jamaicans most about the boycott of the last general election was that they were cheated of a colorful and exciting campaign. In 1980, the majority of Jamaicans reggaeed to Seaga's campaign song. His Jamaica Labour Party offered the people free enterprise, a sharp right turn from Michael Manley's socialism and his flirtation with Cuba. Under the slogan, Deliverance, Seaga, a Harvard-trained former record producer, danced to victory. But there was a darker side to the 1980 election. Armed gangs from the fringes of both parties roamed the streets, picking off opponents. By election day, 750 people had been killed. The recent election, though uncontested, was peaceful. The gunmen were held in check. But for how long? Unemployment runs at 27%, and there's the potential for much evil work for idle hands. Jamaicans are blessed with an abundance of fresh produce, but virtually everything else is imported. And now the country has run out of foreign exchange reserves. How much more can the people take? Businessman Sam Mafood gives a sober assessment.
We are now in a very bad economic situation, and they are still showing a major amount of restraint, probably with the massive increases in our fuel that government has placed upon us recently. In other countries, there may have been mayhem and strike and what have you not. And we have seen, I think, a maturity and an ability to be patient so that we can turn the economy around.
But it's not all gloom in Jamaica these days. The tourists are coming back, but their much-needed dollars are still not enough to offset the loss of export markets for bauxite and sugarcane. So Jamaica is looking at other ways of luring the harder currencies into the country. And the Americans want them to succeed.
Welcome to Kingston. We're delighted to have you and your delegation here.
The White House hopes Jamaica will become a model of free enterprise in the Caribbean, which accounts for the steady stream of congressmen, businessmen, and experts of all kinds into the lobby of Kingston's largest hotel, the Pegasus. More government business is done over cocktails here than in Parliament or the Chamber of Commerce. Ironically, it's here, too, that former Prime Minister Manley intends to hold his parallel parliament. It's a kind of extra-parliamentary opposition, a government in internal exile. However, it remains to be seen whether this is simply an attention-getting device, a harmless piece of Jamaican political theater, or another step on the road to anarchy.
And I think that you're going to find that this is going to be very effective in keeping before the public what we have to say. And you may find there's probably more attention given to what we said there than when our voice is lost in the general hubbub of Parliament.
What's going to be the effect of his proposed parallel parliament here at the Pegasus?
None at all. After about 2 sessions, when the whiskey bills come in, there won't be enough money in the party funds to pay for it.
And shortage of money isn't only a problem for Michael Manley. When the country's bus service ran out of money last year, the government's solution was to scrap it, sell off its decrepit fleet, and then turn the bus routes over to private franchising. The result so far is chaos, an amazing array of vehicles, and a great deal of discomfort for Jamaicans. And the bus situation underscores a basic problem in the Jamaican economy.
Our economic problems are very fundamental here, and it really doesn't matter who's in power. There would be exactly the same problems. And I don't foresee any early or easy solution. The basic problem with Jamaica is that we are breeding faster, at a rate faster, than any possible economic improvement we can expect. And if you do that, you'll obviously get poorer and poorer.
Almost half the population of 2.5 million is under the age of 19, a demographic time bomb that would keep any politician awake at night. Under current conditions, most of these people won't find work. It's a situation that demands fast and radical solutions.
Our policy is to find practical people who have had the business experience in industry, in agriculture, and in the other areas of the productive sector, and who have a marketplace, but who are seeking to establish a production center, and who know from quick soil tests, quick readings of the climate, precisely what can happen in terms of the production of a particular commodity for which they already have a market in existence.
The pride of the new thinking in Jamaica is the Spring Plain Farm, a joint venture of the Jamaican government and private Israeli investors. The farm produces winter vegetables for the North American and European markets. In just 14 months, using the latest technology, the men from the Promised Land have created a Garden of Eden from the Jamaican bush. And best of all, it provides much-needed jobs, almost 4,000 by the time the whole project is operating. But improvements like this may not come in time to stem the tide of political discontent.
I mean, there are some commentators in Jamaica now who feel that one of the things that is keeping the lid on to general public discontent, and I mean by that spontaneous discontent and disillusionment, is just the feeling that there might be new and proper and legitimate elections in the foreseeable future. I think if the government were to try to ride it out for 5 years, I think that we might all be in for a rough passage.
Jamaica's in a race against time, and the stakes are high. In the 1970s, the country gambled on Michael Manley's socialism and lost. Now the bets are on Edward Seaga's capitalism, backed as it is by Ronald Reagan, that high roller in Washington. But it's still a long shot and highly debatable whether the lack of opposition in Parliament will lessen or improve the odds. Never has a Jamaican politician held a tighter rein on government, but Seaga has still to deliver that winning combination of promise and performance.
As long as there is improvement, and as long as the performance is on a basis that can fit with the time frame of expectations, which for some people are very short, for other people are a longer time span, as long as there's a feeling that things are going in the right direction, even if they're not going as fast, even if they're not delivering as much, because there are other problems which are causing the shortage of fulfillment, Jamaicans will continue to give support.
Coming up, hearing the devil backwards.
All finished.
Great! Who wants to go?
I do!
Me too, please.
Give
Give your family good-tasting Trident sugarless gum. Recommended for families who don't want to chew sugar when they chew gum. Trident has all the flavor but no sugar, so there's no risk of sugar damage to your family's teeth. So set a good example with Trident sugarless gum. It has all the flavor but no sugar. Trident for families who don't want to chew sugar when they chew gum.
Beef sounds good. Any way you slice it. Beef sounds good. Any way you slice it. Beef sounds good. Beef sounds good. Any way you slice it. Beef sounds good. Any way you slice it. Beef sounds good.
There's never been anything like it. Introducing new Chrysler Magic Wagon with seating for 2, 5, 7 adults. It gives you better fuel economy than a full-size station wagon, yet it's shorter and easier to park, and has one heck of a lot more room. Chrysler Magic Wagon, back for 5 years or 80,000 kilometers. You've got to drive it to believe it.
We've just made Sure Natural Maxi Shields even better. Watch. Compared to Maxi Pad this thick, Sure Natural is half as thick, and it's all the protection most women need. That's because of our super absorbent system. Now 50% more absorbent for even greater protection. We didn't make them thicker like Maxi Pads. Sure Natural is still half as thick for much more comfort. Maxi Pads or Sure Natural? The choice is obvious. Sure and Natural Maxi Shields. Sure protection, superb comfort.
Cheeseburgers, picnics.
We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Dennis McIntosh. Violence in some rock videos made headlines this week, but while the censors will be watching for overt messages, others are worried the devil is dabbling in rock and roll with hidden messages. You can only hear when you play the music backwards. And some people are worried it does real damage to young fans of satanic rock. To drop their school books for rock records as soon as they get home. At least one study says that listening to rock music is the #1 leisure activity of Canadian teenagers. Whether it's punk, heavy metal, or new wave, the debate continues as to how much the music influences young minds. Now that controversy has been inflamed by charges that backward satanic messages can be found in rock music.
We read in the newspaper that some people would have noticed some message in Led Zeppelin playing it backwards, so we started to make some research, and we done our own research.
Alan Lamont, a 28-year-old former bank clerk, is packing school auditoriums and church basements across Quebec. He soon plans to take his one-man crusade against satanic rock to English Canada. While skeptics may scoff, the recent suicide of a young Edmonton boy has been blamed in part on his obsession with the music of devils and destruction. Alan Lamont says dabbling in devil worship dates back to the Rolling Stones.
They have their Satanic Majesty's Request. It's an album they did. They have the song Sympathy for the Devil. In that song, it's the devil himself that talks about him. He says, "I'm pleased to meet you. Allow me to introduce myself."
Whether a sales gimmick or a search for the sensational, the rock world is riddled with symbols of the occult. Kiss means Knights in Satan's Service, the satanic S of David Bowie, and the horns of the devil in Black Sabbath. As if all this upfront demonology isn't enough, Alan Lamott claims that devilish backward messages can be found as well.
But one thing is sure, these messages are there, and they were not put by either the singer or the songwriter.
They were put there by Satan.
I don't know if Satan himself put it, but the spirit that inspired the songs.
The only way to hear one of these backward messages is to play a tape in reverse. Revolution number 9 by the Beatles has a refrain that goes like this.
Number 9, number 9, number 9.
When you play the Beatles album, when you play number 9 in reverse, the refrain comes out, "Turn me on, dead man." Now listen carefully. In reverse, the phrase, "Another one bites the dust," becomes, "It's fun to smoke marijuana." The obvious question is, why worry about backward messages when nobody plays their records that way? Alan Lamott believes that even when the record is played normally, the message is registered unconsciously and may affect behavior. The Hegedus family of Blainville, Quebec knows what Alan Lamott is talking about. Vicky, a bright, convent-educated 15-year-old, used to be hooked in rock music, but now enjoys listening to opera and Moog synthesizers. 2 years ago, her mother read about subliminal messages in rock, and today Vicky agrees that they once affected her behavior.
I know when I listened to certain songs, I would have this strong urge for alcohol or strong urge to smoke, especially when I would listen to Another One Bites the Dust.
And when did you suddenly decide that there was something wrong?
Well, my mother had told me that they were putting messages in the music. I knew it was possible, and I knew that it was done at times, but I couldn't believe that it was actually being done as common stuff in rock music.
She was very angry because she felt she had been used. And then when she realized it's really a bad influence and everything, she didn't feel at peace anymore knowing the truth.
I just said, "That's it, I've had enough." Went, grabbed took all my records outside, ripped the pockets up and smashed my records in half, burned them and everything.
We asked Alan Lamott to play part of the backward message he found in Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. What do you believe they are saying in there?
Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path that makes me sad, whose power is Satan. He will give you, he is giving you 666.
The same song, Forward.
Every single phrase in that has a double meaning towards Satan himself.
Sorcery.
Sorcery, witchcraft, occults, all kinds of stuff like that. And on top of that, there's a message in it, so it's pretty messy stuff.
And do you believe that possibly the people are being influenced by Satan?
Definitely. I have no doubt on that. Unfortunately, I wish I had some, but I have no doubt on that.
It's 9 a.m. at Georges Vanier High School in North End, Montreal. And 400 teenagers are packing the auditorium to hear Alan Lamott. The reaction to his 2-hour presentation on satanic rock ranges from shock to disbelief. Some are even convinced that rock music changes their behavior.
get more violent. I don't know, I was looking at that and I felt weird. I felt very weird. I got all sugars all over my body. When I saw that, I said, is it true or is it false? And I'm still confused.
I go listen to music, but not put my record in the garbage for that.
No, is anybody...
Recent record burnings in southern Alberta caught the interest of Lethbridge University psychologist John Vokey. He decided to test if backward messages could actually be heard.
Is it fair to say that if you turned anything around and were told what to listen for, that you'd hear it?
In a sense, that's true. What I'm going to do first is I'll just play part of it through so you can get an idea of what backward speech sounds like. So I'll just play a little bit of it here. And I want you to see if you hear any messages. Now, I presume that you didn't hear any great messages.
No, it all sounds like gobbledygook to me.
Now, I want you to listen for the phrase, saw a girl with a weasel in her mouth. Okay. Now, I'm going to play the same piece of tape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there.
He responded in exactly the same fashion as our subjects in the experiment did.
The kind of experiments that go on in recording studios have more to do with audio levels and combining dozens of soundtracks. This producer and engineer are mixing a new album by the Tenets for CBS Records. Studio time is so expensive, as high as $200 an hour, and the electronic gadgetry so complex that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to insert backward messages intentionally. Brian Robertson, president of the Canadian Recording Industry Association, finds the whole idea absurd.
It's an amusing idea, but in reality, if you understood the pressures within the record industry on composers and performing artists and producers and record companies to produce a credible, saleable piece of product, I honestly don't believe that you'd seriously consider that they would be trying to put messages on backwards.
Finding evil messages in rock and roll is far from new. 8 years ago, W5 filmed this congregation in Hamilton, where church leaders blamed the pelvic gyrations of Elvis Presley, among others, for the moral corruption of youth. Although sung in a different key, the message is remarkably similar to the one we hear today.
We need a whole lot more of Jesus and a lot less rock and roll.
Michael Kropfeld, a McGill expert on group behavior.
The devil being active in certain brands of music is not a new idea. There is a need for simplicity, a need for answers in an ever more complex society. I think in the society we live in where there is great stress, there is an easier or higher level of suggestibility. And people are more easily swayed into believing simplistic answers, which offer to them a certain degree, I think, of comfort.
But what do you think is going to happen to all your friends if they continue to listen to this music that you believe is influenced by Satan and the devil?
They're going to get pretty messed up. Some of the messages say just to kill, and that's why some kids will go out in the street and kill. Some will say just to rape or kill a black or something. It'll say all kinds of messages, not just to Satan.
Just how seriously should we take all of this? Some people might find a deep and diabolical meaning in the fact that my name, Dennis, backwards is sinned. Whether my parents intended it that way or the devil made them do it, we'll never know. We do know that if you listen long and hard enough, backward messages can be found in just about anything. So, just for the hell of it, we listened to a newly released rock video, in reverse of course, and found that it's not just the devil who's got rhythm.
Next, a profile in courage.
Cheese pleases picnics. Cheese please. Cheese pleases lunch and cheese pleases neighbors. When you treat them all to brunch, cheese pleases parties. Cheese please. Cheese pleases me and cheese pleases sports fans. Watching games on the TV, cheese pleases work. Cheese please. Cheese pleases play. And cheese pleases children. Show your cheeses more warmth. Serve them up as a snack more often. Cheese please.
It's made from pure Colombian coffee beans, so it's uniquely mild, yet rich, with a subtle, distinctive flavor. New Nescafe Colombia. Nescafe, a world of flavor.
Darlinger, do you know what day it is? It's Herbert D. Langley Day.
Who's Herbert D. Langley?
He gave us our first surprise holiday. One day we had to shut down production because we didn't have stock. Herbert wasn't using long distance to phone suppliers. With long distance, you control stock immediately and eliminate costly mistakes.
Where's Herbert now?
We're not sure.
Business long distance. Today's way to operate.
As a woman, I like to feel feminine and secure. Something the makers of MaxiThins understand. They've taken the bulk out of maxi pads and replaced it with a thin layer of super absorbent material. So I get maxi pad protection in a thinner, more discreet pad. They're even folded and wrapped to fit the smallest purse. For maxi pad protection that's feminine and discreet, it's MaxiThins pads from Tampax.
Jim Reed. There are some people who stand out above the rest. Some people with a special sort of courage. We met such a man in Northern Ireland. He has what can only be defined as grace under fire. He is Dr. Willoughby Wilson. For the past 15 years, he and the staff of the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast have stood at the ready as the country they love has torn itself apart. More than once, the doctor's work has pushed them to the wall. Northern Ireland lives in cycles of calm and violence. Death and destruction over the years have made Belfast a city of barriers and walls. The Royal Victoria Hospital is located in the most troubled part of a troubled city. It's squeezed in between hardline Republican Catholics on the one side and militant Protestants on the other. Ironically, its proximity to the areas of violence in this city have given the victims of that violence easy, quick access to the best medical treatment in the world. The hospital has never recognized barriers like this one, which were designed to keep the two sides apart. Most of us read about the violence in headlines. We shrug it off because we are distant from it. But Dr. Willoughby Wilson, chief surgeon at Royal Victoria, still weeps at the thought of what the violence does. And as he says, it is no respecter of persons.
We get soldiers, we get policemen, we get terrorists, we get innocent victims who are caught in crossfire, whatever. One doesn't ask any questions. One deals with the patient as a patient. When you know who you're dealing with, and you know you're dealing with a terrorist, one goes through all the emotions. Hate, bitterness, almost wishing for revenge. Then ultimately you accept this is the situation in which you're living, and really ultimately you pity the chap who goes out and shoots his fellow countrymen.
59 years of age, born in Northern Ireland, he's the father of 4 children, 3 of whom are also doctors. Like his countrymen, Dr. Wilson and his family are caught up in a struggle that has become increasingly difficult to comprehend. There is a continual state of tension, of watchfulness, because so often the violence is random. No one knows where the terrorist will strike next. The explosions and the shootings are random events. But once the event has happened, the aftermath is always routine, predictable. The survivors are transported rapidly through the city. And whether the victim is a Catholic, a Protestant, a loyalist policeman, or a Republican, he or she will likely end up at the Royal Victoria. The victim's fate is in the doctor's hands now, and the doctors, including Wilson, do react as human beings.
I think one of the things that has probably affected me most has been the emotional side of the problem. Telling you your daughter has lost both limbs. Telling the parents who've flown from England, Scotland or Wales that their 19-year-old son, who happened to be a soldier, is dead when they arrive the morning after a shooting. The communication, as in every aspect of medicine, is one of the very difficult problems. And the agonies which relatives go through is got to be seen to be believed. I think we've all cried ourselves to sleep over the situation. You never become hardened to it, certainly.
But by the early 70s, the hospital itself had become hardened to the presence of soldiers in the corridors carrying weapons so out of place in a medical center. But the weapons had become necessary to protect a terrorist patient, guard an informer, and keep the living victims alive. They have treated and still do treat cases of kneecapping, castration, torture of all kinds. But the worst injuries are suffered by the bomb victims.
Car bombs, I think, were probably the worst injuries. The Abercorn disaster, which is now probably still our worst disaster.
The bomb went off, apparently with very little warning at all, and many people were injured.
We had 142 victims arrive here at 5 o'clock on a Saturday. The bomb went off at 4:45 in the centre of Belfast in a crowded restaurant.
There had been 50 people on the ground floor and 200 upstairs, many of them women, resting their feet and having tea with their children after an afternoon shopping. Warning of the bomb, which was on the ground floor, hadn't reached them when it exploded.
2 dead, one a colleague's daughter, who was going home from playing hockey, a 19-year-old girl. The peppering and blast effect, we didn't fully appreciate at that stage, but those in close proximity to a bomb get frightful blast injuries to their lungs. And whilst they're all right for 2 or 3 days, then their lungs, rather like poisoning.
All right, Pat. You're all right, man.
There were 11 limbs amputated. I have a horrific photograph of 11 limbs, I think 9 eyes, bits and pieces, in the corner of the theatre when we finished that evening.
Oh, well, we see we have to think.
For doctors like Willoughby Wilson, the violence has no meaning except that people suffer equally, whether they are innocent or guilty. It has produced no changes in the city, except to force up more barriers and more walls to keep people farther apart. It has served only to make the future ever more bleak for the young people, the children who, unlike Dr. Wilson, have become hardened. In a perverse way, the Royal Victoria Hospital owes a debt to the trouble here, because it's given the doctors and nurses the kind of experience and training they needed to make this hospital highly flexible and responsive, not just to victims of the trouble, but to the population at large. It is sadly ironic that out of the evil of the Irish Troubles have come medical advances that make this hospital a leader in many specialties. The treatment of the head injuries and severe trauma that result from automobile accidents, for example. The Royal Victoria is home to some of the best thoracic and vascular surgeons in the world. Even more ironic is that this place of compassion and mercy must exist even today as a walled fortress, the barbed wire and security systems giving silent testimony to the violence of the past and the fears for the future. And no one is immune. One afternoon in broad daylight, Dr. Wilson himself was kidnapped, bound, held incommunicado for 4 hours and interrogated. But none of the doctor's experiences can answer the crucial question, why?
I've grown up in this area. I've lived here most of my life, and I don't understand it. So I find it totally impossible to explain to an outsider what really is the basis of the whole insurrection or violence or whatever. It's quite beyond my comprehension. Violence I detest. Violence as a means for political achievement I detest. And I think all I would love to see is the terrorist who's caused an explosion, to see his victim within half an hour, to see the relatives within half an hour, to see the anguish and the heartbreak. They wouldn't do it if they saw this side of it. This is what we see. And I don't think violence in any situation is justified as a means of political settlement to any problem. It's futile.
That Now you can fly the airline you prefer to fly. From Toronto, CP Air offers 3 non-stops to Vancouver, 4 to Montreal or Ottawa, 4 flights to Calgary, 3 non-stops to Edmonton, and 4 more to Winnipeg. And when you fly CP Air in Canada this winter, you could win a trip for 12 in our Hawaiian Bubble Bash sweepstakes. Call us first.
Call us first. I knew someday I'd find it. Got to find out what's behind it. Find out what's behind your perfect smile. Got to get up close to you. I got to get up close. You're close to perfection.
What's behind the close-up smile? Fresh breath, whiter teeth, and now fluoride.
You're close to perfection.
Close-up with fluoride every day.
When you file for your tax refund the traditional way, you could wait and wait and wait while the system holds on to your refund. But when you come to Bentax for a fee, you get money for your federal refund in a few days, and we'll prepare that return at no extra charge. So why wait? Bentax puts your money where it belongs, in your pocket, fast.
There's another side to this world, in the South Pacific. CP Air flies from Toronto to Australia and Fiji, with convenient connections onto New Zealand. And whether you're flying Royal Canadian class on business or traveling on a budget, you'll be comfortable in the knowledge that for the same price as any ordinary airline, you're flying CP Air. Ask your travel agent to call us first.
Letters to W5. Our program on the causes of the Air Canada DC-9 accident at Toronto Airport in 1978 brought this comment from Michael Monroe of Milton, Ontario. Regarding the ravine at the end of the runway at Toronto, if only we could fill it with government rhetoric. Our story also provoked this exchange in the House of Commons.
The CTV program W5 aired last Sunday revealed that Transport Canada's safety standards with respect to aircraft tire inspection and with respect to the cleaning of runways of rubber contamination was below acceptable safety standards. Having regard for that, has the minister discussed this with his officials, and what action is he going to take? And secondly, is he satisfied with the answers that were given by Transport Canada officials, since it appeared that officials were both confused about the standards that were in place by Transport Canada and the method in which they were being applied?
Mr. Speaker, I have indeed had some interesting discussions with officials concerning the findings that were brought forward during that program. I think, as in any cases, there are different points of view as to what is a applicable standard. I think, in particularly in the case of the testing of rubber tires, the retread tires on airplanes, there are very effective methods, and we've met with the airlines to determine that their present methods are a strong guarantee of a safety in this area. But I would point out to the honourable member that I would hope to be in a position the next 1 or 2 days to be making some public announcements about some of the results of those discussions we've had. I hope he can contain his anxiety and his interest until that time. Then we can have a good discussion about it.
That's Jane Russell, starlet. Full-figured then and full-figured now. And today we gals know how to keep our full figures looking pretty. Under the smoothest fashions, try the Playtex 18-hour seamless bra. Not a seam showing to spoil the smooth look. And the unique fabric that stretches for real support, real comfort in the 18-hour bra makes 18-hour girdles control comfortably. Try Playtex 18-hour bras and girdles. Full figures never look better.
Can you see it? Nuts in the flakes. Can you hear it? Sounds crunchy. Can you taste it? Honey, nuts, and corn. It's Kellogg's Honey Nut Corn Flakes. Can you see it? Nuts in the flakes. Can you hear it? Sounds crunchy. Can you taste it? Honey, nuts, and corn. Flavor you can see, hear, and taste. It's Kellogg's Honey Nut Corn Flakes. Tony. Real curl, real bounce, real swing, bop, bop. If you really want a perm, get a Tony. Real curl, real bounce, real swing, bop, bop.
If you want it to last,
Tony,
get a real perm.
Tony.
The soft and lasting perm.
If you really want a perm, get a Tony. Real curl, real bounce, real swing.
See how good you can look?
If you really want a perm, get a Tony. Real curl, real bounce, real swing. Tony.
The soft and lasting perm.
Real swing.
As a woman, I like to feel feminine and secure. Something the makers of maxi-thins understand. They've taken the bulk out of maxi pads and replaced it with a thin layer of super absorbent material. So I get maxi pad protection in a thinner, more discreet pad. They're even folded and wrapped to fit the smallest purse. For maxi pad protection that's feminine and discreet, it's maxi-thins pads from Tampax.
I'm Helen Hutchinson. This weekend, many of Canada's top athletes left for the Winter Olympic Games. Tomorrow, I'll be joining them in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, to help cover the Games for CTV. Last week, I visited 2 young figure skaters from the Canadian team. They aren't the champions. They're ranked number 2. And in this sport, that means more than just trying harder. Gary Beacom is the darling of Canadian skating fans. His style is exciting and innovative. He's been described as a brilliant choreographer and a fabulous technician. At the Canadian Championships in Regina earlier this month, he lost narrowly to reigning champion Brian Orser. But Gary was given a standing ovation. Many felt he should have won. Olympic silver medalist Debbie Wilkes.
A lot of people felt that really Gary was the champion that day in both the short program and the long program. He was superb.
In skating circles, Gary is regarded as a bit of a rebel, an outsider who doesn't do things quite the way they're supposed to be done. Unlike most competitive skaters, Gary doesn't devote himself to the sport full-time. At age 23, he's in his 4th year at the University of Toronto, studying physics and philosophy. He skates only 2 or 3 hours a day, compared to the 7 to 8 hours other skaters spend on the ice. But what makes him unique is that he has no coach, no choreographer, and no stylist. That's unheard of in the skating world. By tradition, skaters are not loners. They're team players who depend on a lot of off-ice backup. Gary has bucked the system, and he feels it has hurt him in the eyes of the people who judge skating competitions. Would it help with the judges if you were more conventional, if you, for instance, had a coach?
Oh, yes, that would help quite a bit because I get the feeling that if you really fit in with the system and the judges are part of the system, then, you know, you're kind of one of them. We're all in this thing together. I'm sort of a little bit of a maverick, maybe.
His style reflects his approach. It's unorthodox, unconventional, and has even been called weird. But it does please the crowds. His artistic impressions bring shrieks and gasps from the fans, but don't always impress the judges, who base part of their scoring on the artistry.
The artistic mark doesn't really mean anything. It's really mostly just a political fudge factor mark.
What do you mean by fudge factor?
Well, politics, of course, is a very big part of skating since there's judges in it. And so the artistic mark gives the judges leeway to give good marks to skaters who have established a reputation, even if they didn't happen to skate well on a particular performance.
Gary often practices with girlfriend Gia. Also a skater, she is able to play some of the role of coach, but she avoids the world of competitive skating.
I don't seem to fit in too well. Skaters are not supposed to have girlfriends. They're supposed to be dedicated to the sport, not to other things. So in some ways I'm looked down on quite a bit. So I try to stay away from the big scene in the skating.
They look down on that? I mean, that's amazing. Do they think you're some sort of groupie?
Well, they figure maybe if Gary wasn't seeing this girl, he would be doing so much better.
Debbie Wilkes, the silver medalist who now manages some of Canada's top professional skaters.
Well, now, look at this. You have a skater who skates maybe at most half of the time that everyone else skates during the day. Usually a skater will practice up to 8 hours. Gary maybe does 3, maybe 4. You're not supposed to train like that. It says it somewhere. Then he has a girlfriend. He goes to school. He doesn't have a coach. This is the part that blows most people's mind away. How does he produce what he produces without someone hovering over him to give proper direction?
Part of the politics of skating is that countries like to enter their reigning champions. The international judges know the history of each of the skaters, and those past performances have a great effect on how they are viewed by the judges. If a champion were dethroned during an Olympic year, his chances of gaining a medal would diminish and also have an effect on the team's standing. Some believe this was a factor in Brian Orser's victory in Regina, even though some fans felt he turned in a less than perfect performance. It's been said that you can't unseat a champion during an Olympic year. Is that generally true?
I think so. Canada, in particular, the Canadian Figure Skating Association, is trying to send a team in its strongest form. And it is always kind of felt that the Europeans look at the Canadian and North American press and see what all the dirt is in figure skating and all the gossip and who's doing what and who fell doing what and what the latest innovations are. And when they hear that a champion has been unseated, it can be very devastating for the whole team and not just for the individual.
Number 2 on the women's team is Elizabeth Manley. She finished second to Kay Thompson in Regina. Elizabeth is another crowd pleaser. She's 18 years old and has been a competitive skater since she was 7. But last year, the pressure of competition almost forced her out of the sport.
When I came home from nationals last year, I was really down. I was even thoughts about getting out of skating, and I didn't know if it was worth giving up my health for skating.
At home in Ottawa with new coaches Peter and Sonia Dunfield, Elizabeth puts in 7 or 8 hours of practice a day. Her performances last year were disappointing. She'd gone to Lake Placid to train with an Austrian coach, but the combination of being away from home and, as she puts it, wanting to be champion too badly took its toll. Totally depressed, she gained 20 pounds and her hair started to fall out. Lacking a strong track record means that she may not be considered a strong contender by the Olympic judges. So Elizabeth plans to show them her best at an early stage.
What I'm going to do, for instance, is I'm going to try to win their hearts on practices. I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to do perfect practices every day, present them, and just show that I'm back and I'm here to stay, sort of thing, and hope that I can win their hearts. So when it comes time to the competition, they'll say, well, we know her. She was great on practices, and, you know, so they know me before the actual competition starts.
Well, it's a very good statement, I think, because it demonstrates how some of the politics works in figure skating. A skater goes to their practices at international events, and they don't go to practice, they go to win. And a judge may be sitting in the stands and taking little notes about really how that skater skates. Perhaps it's only just mental notes, but the judge will notice. Of all the Olympic events, figure skating is perhaps the most beautiful and moving to watch. With Gary Beacom and Elizabeth Manley, along with Brian Orser and Kay Thompson, Canada will be well represented in Sarajevo. They're ready to strut their stuff before the world's best. The drama begins, as any skater will tell you, when he stands there on the ice for what seems like an eternity, waiting for the music to start.